Hello, Year Fours. Today we are going to read chapter 3 and chapter 4. Now, if you remember, Solomon and his grandfather were heading towards the bus at the end of chapter 2, and they've never been on a bus before, so I think they were feeling quite nervous. So let's find out what happens next. So, the bus to Piazza was much smaller than the big red ones that rumble in and out of Kodami. It was packed tight with people already. "It's full," I said, hanging back. But Yusuf gave me a shove in the back, and I shot in through the door, almost into the lap of a fat lady with a scarf tied round her head. My face went hot with embarrassment, but I didn't have time to think about it, because then Yusuf gave grandfather a push, and he almost landed on top of her too. Somehow or other, everyone shuffled up a bit, and grandfather got to sit down properly, with me squashed between him and the fat lady. Then the boy by the door slid it shut with a slam, and we were off. It was awful. I couldn't help leaning on the fat lady, and she kept prodding me with her elbows, muttering with annoyance, and the bus set off with a roar and then lurched all over the place. Nobody seemed to think there was anything odd about it. I couldn't imagine how people lived like this all the time. I was worried about paying the fare because I had no idea how much money it would cost. I started trying to pull the money pouch out from inside my shirt. Luckily, grandfather knew what to do. He fished some coins out of his pocket and gave them to the boy, who accepted them with a nod. It was stuffy in the bus. I didn't mind the smell of hot people, but the petrol fumes were disgusting, and I thought I was going to be sick. "I can't be sick," I told myself. "I mustn't be sick. Please don't let me be sick." Just then I thought just when I thought I'd have to be, the boy by the door called out, "Piazza!" and the bus jerked to a stop, and the door slid open and everyone tumbled out. I'd been dreading this bit. I kept remembering what Abba had said about grandfather being old and how he hadn't been in Addis Ababa for years and how I would have to look after him. "I can't look after him," I thought, feeling panicky. "I can't look after myself. I don't know where we are or where to go." I needn't have worried after all. Grandfather had settled his shawl back round his shoulders, and now he looked ready to set off. "Don't stand there gawping, Solomon," he said. "Come here. What do you expect me to lean on? Thin air?" Then he set off, his hand clamped onto my shoulder, and we pushed our way through the crowds of people. I felt worse than I'd felt all day. My feet hurt, my ears buzzed with the noise of the people and the traffic, and my stomach was still churning after the ride in the bus. "Are we nearly there, grandfather?" I wanted to ask, but I didn't because it would have sounded childish. But then grandfather's hand twisted on my shoulder as he pushed me out of the big crowded street and down a little lane. He stopped. "Is this it?" I said. He didn't answer, and looking up I saw something I'd never seen before. Grandfather was unsure of himself. He looked smaller all of a sudden, and older. We'd stopped outside a corrugated iron fence, and as we stood there a door in it opened, and a man stepped out. He looked about the same age as my father. Grandfather cleared his throat. "Good day," he said in a voice that sounded almost quavery. "Is this the house of Mr. Wandoo?" The man was setting off up the lane, but he stopped and turned. Yes?" It was evening already, and the light had almost gone. The man leaned forward to look closely at grandfather. "Uncle Demisi, is that you?" I felt almost weak with relief, and I could tell that grandfather did too. "Wandoo, my boy, it's you, isn't it?" They clasped each other's hands and touched shoulders, right then left then right. But even in the dim light I could see what grandfather couldn't. My father's cousin looked as if he'd had a nasty shock. He almost looked scared of us, I thought. He wishes we hadn't come anyway. Cousin Wandoo seemed to put himself together and managed a weak smile. "Come in, uncle," he said, leading us into his compound. "Where have you come from? Have you travelled far today?" "Only from home," grandfather said. We had crossed the little patch of bare earth in front of the house, and now cousin Wandoo was opening the door. And how was the journey? I suppose the bus was jam-packed. Did it break down? It always does when I travel out of Addis. He's laughing at us, I thought. He thinks we're ignorant. What bus? We walked, of course, Grandfather said. His sharpness usually scared me, but I was glad to hear it in his voice now. You walked? Wandoo sounded astonished. A woman had pushed aside the bead curtain that covered a door at the back of the room. She had a narrow face and a sharp look in her eyes. She stared in alarm when she saw us and pushed away the little girl who was holding onto her skirt. Meseret, you remember Uncle Demisi? Said Cousin Wandoo. It's wonderful to see him after all this time, isn't it? He sounded almost pleading. You're welcome, said Cousin Meseret unwillingly. Who's this? All eyes turned on me. I stood there feeling stupid, a hot flush spreading right through me. He's Solomon, my grandson, Grandfather said shortly. He walked all the way from Kudami too? Cousin Wandoo didn't seem able to believe it. Of course he did, said Grandfather. It's nothing to a boy his age. When I was 11, And he started on one of his rambling stories. All I could think was, when are they going to give us a drink or something to eat? They did at last, of course. There was a lot of bustling about, and I heard sharp words from Cousin Meseret, who was in the kitchen behind the living room. She was telling Cousin Wandoo what to do. I was a bit shocked, quite honestly. Ma would never have talked to Abba like that. At last Cousin Wandoo came out with some bottles of orange soda for us to drink. I was glad I'd had a fizzy drink once at Marcos's house, or the bubbles would have given me a real surprise. He looked nervous as he fumbled with the bottle opener. You'll stay here with us, of course, Cousin Wandoo said, shooting a glance at his wife, who nodded, smiling stiffly. Something inside me relaxed. I hadn't realized how worried I'd been about where we were going to sleep that night. Yes, I thought triumphantly, we've made it, we're here. I don't remember much more about that evening because as soon as we'd had supper, and it was a nice one too with plenty of meat, I felt so sleepy that I could hardly keep my eyes open. I did hear Grandfather say, It's only for a couple of nights, Wandoo. There's a man I have to see tomorrow. We'll be going home the day after that. And I saw relief in Cousin Wandoo's eyes as he said unconvincingly, Stay as long as you like, Uncle. You know that my house is your house. And that is the end of chapter 3. I'll see you back in a moment for chapter 4.